finished by the end of May. On the 1st of May of this year, I issued a new order and a press release giving a new timetable. The reason is entirely my fault. The burden of writing this particular report falls largely to me in the first instance. And it has been rather more burdensome than I had anticipated. The sheer volume of material that I have had to work through in order to do justice to the very many contributions that we've had has taken me far longer than I had anticipated. Once I have drafted this report, it needs obviously to be circulated with Mr. Wilson, my co-commissioner, and my legal team. This whole process has just taken longer than I had imagined. Once we've agreed a draft, I then have to serve on all of those people that we might criticize, whether they be institutions, companies, or individuals, a document called a salmon letter. There's nothing magical about this. All it does is to provide a detail of the kind of criticisms that we might be making of those individuals, companies, or institutions. It is right and proper that it should be detailed. And I've been advised and can see from myself that the law in Trinidad and Tobago requires it to be detailed. And you will understand that because people need to be able to properly respond to a criticism of them. And in order to do that, I'm anxious that they should have the most comprehensive critique that we have drafted. As I say, that has taken rather longer than I anticipated. But as a result, they will then need to have time to consider it and to respond. And I have, particularly in the most engaged of those who are party to these proceedings, they should have an opportunity to address me orally as well as in writing if they wish to do so. Now, that whole process has obviously put our timetable back. And as a result, I expect not to have this report completed until sometime in July. I've asked the President for permission to serve it at that time. So please forgive me, bear with me. I promise you that I will do this as quickly as I possibly can that does justice to all of the parties. May I say, on a more positive note, that I'm very pleased to have learned that Mr. Ronnie Bissessar, who has been one of the lawyers helping me and Mr. Wilson in this Commission of Inquiry, has been made senior counsel. I'd like to wish that I could take some credit for that, but I think it's probably in spite of being part of our team that he's managed that great feat. So I'm very pleased for him, and no doubt he will go on to do great things in Trinidad and Tobago. If there are any questions from anyone, I'm perfectly happy to field them now.
Good morning. Are you guys hearing me?
I am indeed. It's Mr. Lalchan, is it?
Right. Mr. Kevin Lalchan from WAC Radio 90.1 FM.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Mr. Lynch, and whoever is there as well, full panel. Mr. Lynch, could you state who are the people who were given the salmon letters?
I'm afraid I can't. I'm not allowed to. As much as I would like to tell you that, I'm not really allowed to. And the reason is this, is because this is a draft of the report in which we may identify a number of criticisms of certain individuals, as I say, institutions or companies. Now, they must have an opportunity to respond to those criticisms. And it may be that we would be persuaded not to criticize them following having their representations. And so it wouldn't be fair on them that it became public knowledge that those individuals or institutions have received such a letter only for it not to then feature as part of the report. So at this stage, I'm afraid I cannot tell you who will be receiving such letters. They don't know yet either. It's right that it should be that way. So I'm sorry, Mr. Lachlan, I can't help you there.
And Mr. Lynch, another question, please, sir. From in March, we were told, I think it was in February or March, and we were told that the final report would be submitted in April. And then
May.
Yes.
Well,
that was up in the Commission of Inquiry in Port of Spain. We were supposed to get it up by April, then we see it went to May. Then we got a press release stating that it was put up backdated to June. And now we are seeing it is in August 31st, which, by the way, is a public holiday. What reassurance could you give?
Well, let me reassure you. First of all, that is a stopgap date in August. It's not going to be August. It'll be well in advance of that. And you know, I was hoping to have this report ready in May. And I believe that we're going to be knocked back by a matter of weeks. So we're talking about maybe 5 or 6 weeks off the date that I had originally planned. And the only reason for that is twofold. One, the sheer volume of material that I've had to work through, and secondly, that the people who are going to receive these salmon letters need to have as comprehensive a response as I can possibly give them of what we think the position is at this stage. And that has taken longer than I would have anticipated. In some countries, that kind of letter can be in a very general way. But in the jurisdiction that is Trinidad and Tobago, it needs to be detailed, and it's right that it should be. In my view, it's only fair that those who are about to be criticized should have the greatest opportunity to address those criticisms before any report is published. So I am sorry that it has been delayed by a few weeks. And I know that we put in a stopgap just in case something should happen. Maybe I get run over by a bus or something. But the reason for having this delay is, I hope, clear now. And the reason why I wanted to come on and explain it to you is because I don't want anyone to think that we're sitting back doing nothing while this matter just drifts on. I can assure you that is not the case.
Understood. Another question, Mr. Lynch. From my understanding from the press release which was sent to us, is that the final report will be submitted to the President of Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Christine Kangaloo. Could
Correct.
You state if there are other organizations or personnel that the final report would be submitted to? Because some weeks ago, I think it was in the closing statement of Mr. Maraj. No, it was a press release from Mr. Maraj where I read in the newspaper that he would like to see the final report be submitted in Parliament. So could you say the entities, organizations, or personnel that this final report would be submitted to?
Well, let me make my position clear. I'm appointed by the President, and my responsibility is to report to the President, and that is what I'm doing. Whether that is then immediately disseminated to the government and to the individual ministers responsible, Mr. Young and others, whether it goes to the legal agencies, the Attorney General's Department or the DPP's department, any of those things will be dependent not on what I think, but on what your government thinks. And the President's responsibility, having appointed me to prepare this report, is to receive it and then to do with it as she deems appropriate. She is your President, and she will no doubt disseminate it to those that she thinks need to have it. What I can say is this, is that if it is the case that this commission were to recommend any prosecutions of anybody for anything, then clearly that's something that the persons responsible for prosecuting those sorts of offences will need to have the report. It doesn't make any sense, does it? If I were, for example, to recommend that somebody should be prosecuted for a breach of this law or that law, that the Department of Public Prosecutions wouldn't have a copy of the report to be able to consider that as well. And I imagine that your President will have little hesitation in making sure that they have a copy of it.
Mr. Lynch, just one. Excuse. So someone's going to say something? Can I go ahead?
Well, Mr. Lalchin, if you ask your last question, then if anybody else wants to ask anything that arises, they can.
I had one last question, Mr. Lynch.
Very well.
Okay. Mr. Lynch, from last year, July 7th to September the 7th, from SAPA, it was clearly understood the powers which the Commission of Inquiry has,
Yes.
right? So in terms of criminal prosecution and so forth, I understand that is beyond all the reach or powers, right? So having been around with the families and speaking to the families, right? You know, it is going well on 15 months, and due to the death of the divers, they have lost breadwinners, the sole breadwinners of their families. So could you state or say if any recommendations would be put forward in your final report stating that financial compensation be made to the families?
Well, I need to be a little careful, I'm afraid. I mean, I have my own personal views, which are quite separate from my responsibility as the chairman of this Commission of Inquiry. Look, anybody in the situation in which these families are need to be helped. That is just a human thing. It's got nothing to do with whose responsibility it is, whether it was one person's fault, one company's fault, or leave that to one side for a minute. If your family have suffered a bereavement in the manner in which these families have, common decency says, let's help them. Just let's help them. You don't need to put your hand up and say it's my responsibility, I feel responsible. Just help them out. I mean, that's just common decency. And I'm as a human being, have no hesitation in saying that. What I can ultimately recommend in such a report is not really something within my remit, because my responsibility with Mr. Wilson is to put together the facts as we see them, make recommendations as to what might happen as a result of those facts, and then to consider whether or not there are measures that can be put in place to ensure that this sort of tragedy never, ever happens again.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You're welcome. Now, does anyone else have any questions?
Yes. Hi, good morning, Chairman Lynch and everyone else tuned in this morning. Cindy Raghubatika Singh, TV6 News.
Right. I'm going to call you Cindy, if that's all right.
Yes, that's fine. Absolutely.
Right.
So I just wanted to clarify a couple of things in terms of the timeline. When exactly was the draft completed so that we're now at the salmon letter stage? Do you have a date?
Say that again. So when is the draft completed so that we're at the salmon letter stage? The salmon letters need to go out next week. I am currently working through a second to final draft, if I can put it like that, which contains many of the things that I need to put in those letters.
Okay. When was the request made to the president for the extension?
Last week.
You all have gotten a response as yet?
I haven't seen one, no.
But I guess you're confident it will come.
I imagine so. All I can do is to assure the president that I am working diligently, having cleared my desk of all other matters. I'm working diligently to make sure that we have it as soon as is humanly possible, that does justice to the many, many representations we had. Can I just say, you know, we dealt with quite a few witnesses during the course of the public hearings, but you will appreciate there are very, very many more where we just had written statements. So they are not part of what the public will have seen unless they went on our website and look at the sheer volume of material. And believe me, if you do, you can see it for yourself, that we have to work our way through. And it would be a disservice to those people in Trinidad and Tobago who've taken the time to properly write to us in a statement setting out what they understand the position to be, for us to simply disregard it. And it would not be appropriate to do that. So I have taken the time to ensure that I read every single page that it is necessary for me to do in order to complete this report.
Absolutely, Chairman. Just two final things. I know you didn't want to identify who the people or organizations the salmon letters will go to, but can you say how many are expected to go out?
No, I can't. I've got my own draft. Once this draft is finalized, topped and tailed by me, Mr. Wilson will need to consider it, and my legal team will need to consider it before we identify the specific passages that need to go into each salmon letter that is to be issued. What I can tell you, and I don't think it be unreasonable to say this, that there are going to be some salmon letters, and that means that there are going to be critiques of certain individuals, of certain companies or institutions. To that extent, I can say that that is the case. If there were none, I wouldn't be seeking this delay in the preparation of the report. So we're not playing a game here. There are going to be some salmon letters. They need to be detailed, and they won't be ready until next week.
All right. And finally, I know he says a second sort of draft, but just to kind of get an idea as to how comprehensive the direction you're going in, because you would have obviously highlighted a few times how extensive the work has been to go through all these documents. You know, how many pages are we looking at for your draft so far?
Well, let me be clear. First of all, the draft, which seeks to identify upon the evidence the criticisms that we might level, that draft is different from the final draft once we have had their responses. You will appreciate that I can't finalize a report until I've given everyone the opportunity to respond to the criticisms that we might make. That may significantly affect the length of the report or the withdrawal of certain criticisms. And so for me to throw out a number at the moment, I mean, if I tell you that I'm over 100 pages of typewritten script as my second draft, you will have an appreciation of the kind of work that is involved. And I don't know whether it will end up being that long or whether it will be longer, because I can't possibly predict what sort of responses I will get to the criticisms that will be leveled.
I understand. Thank you so much, Chairman Lynch, and to everyone else.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Anybody else? There's a gentleman wearing a blue hat who seems to be talking and I can't hear him.
I was asking if you were hearing me. Apparently, you were not hearing me. So
Perhaps you could repeat your question.
You are hearing me, right?
I am now.
Okay, I am Daniel George from Sawick Media Mode, and I hope I don't repeat any questions that were asked before, seeing that I had a slight internet challenge, so I had to come outside, which I hope is much better. I am concerned about the salmon letters that I saw in the email, and my concern with that is if there were delays based on new letters that I think I heard you refer to that you had to read. I am concerned if more letters come, let's say between today and over the next few weeks, if that will cause a further delay, or if there's going to be a cutoff point at some point with a deadline. Also, I am concerned about whether there was a breakdown in communication between the commission and the relatives of the divers. Also, I am also very, very curious as to the date which I'm seeing that appears to be Independence Day on the email. So I don't know how or who came up with that Independence Day, and if that is making any type of sense at all. So please allow me to just leave those thoughts here. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I'll do my best to answer them, Mr. George. The position is this: first of all, as to the salmon letters, as I say, they are due out next week, in the middle of next week. I will make sure that happens. it's not going to go beyond next week. There is no prospect of my issuing salmon letters beyond that date, short of something new that I am unaware of being brought up. So the cutoff date for the issuance of the salmon letters is next week. So that's the first thing. As to communication with the families and all the relatives of those who've been affected by this, we are a commission of inquiry set up by the president to be independent, and that is what we should do. That means there are no secret communications with anybody. Our position has to be as open and as public as it can possibly be. And I have sought to treat the relatives in the way which I think it is only fair and proper that they should be, which is to indulge them wherever I can, that they've made their contribution to the Commission of Inquiry, for which we are grateful. And that is the position until this report has been made available to the president and thereafter public. So it is a matter for the government of the day and the president as to when that should be. But I want to assure the relatives that we will ensure they have the earliest possible opportunity of considering our findings. That is not in my gift. It is in the gift of your government and your president. But rest assured that certainly as far as I'm concerned, it would be a gross injustice to them if they were not being provided with a copy of our report at the earliest opportunity that the president and the government thinks fair and proper. As to the choice of Independence Day, it wasn't my choice, and I'm very pleased to know that you will have the report well in advance of your Independence Day. Whilst that date was identified as a backstop in the event of some unforeseeable tragedy befalling me as the author of the report, you can be assured that it will be provided well in advance of Independence Day. I hope that answers the three questions that you had, Mr. George. Good. Anyone else have anything they wish to ask? No? Good. Well, I again, let me extend my apologies. They are mine to extend. It's my fault that we are delayed in the way we are. It's just taken me far longer than I could possibly have imagined. And I am not going to cut corners. I'm not going to take any advantage of the fact that it's just me doing it. I'm going to ensure that everybody has a fair hearing from me in the part that I play in reading every single statement and every document that's necessary to prepare this report properly. It will be ready. It will be ready, as I say, I hope, in the very early part of July. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for bearing with me. And I will no doubt be able to speak to everybody again in the very near future. Thank you.